Hey everybody, I'm Jesse, and welcome to another edition of Gen X Thinks. And today I'm going to talk about fear, how it's used in our society, by our institutions, by our governments. It's used against the populations. And credit for the idea for this episode goes to Laik Gullikson. And he's got his own channel. It's Just Another Guy in the Woods. I invite you to go check that out. But he's a really smart guy. I've talked to him a few times. Very active member of Gen X Thinks, always in the comments. And he probably has the most credits for episode inspiration. So thank you, Laik, for the inspiration for this video and all the other videos you've suggested, and for your support of the channel. I really do appreciate it. Thanks, Laik. And now on with the show. Anatomy of fear. We've got so many things to be afraid of now. We're told, right? We're told that we're supposed to be afraid of just about everything. The Middle East, terrorism in the Middle East, drugs, except for the pharmaceutical drugs. Those are completely 100% safe. Nothing to worry about there. Ignore all the disclaimers at the end of the commercials. Those are fine. But anything sold on the streets, we need to be afraid of, because they're just going to kick your door in and force you to take some or something. And we've got, the fear of war constantly, the fear on all these, how do I say it? These vague fears, right? And most of them they're just kind of vague ideas out there, like aliens and all this other weird stuff, right? The alt-right and terrorism and Nazis and all this stuff. It's just all kinds of fear. And they use this fear to divide us, okay? Racism, everybody's afraid of racism. They use this fear to divide us. If I'm afraid of you, then I can't sit down and have a decent conversation with you and try to work things out, right? Because you're a Republican and I'm a Democrat, or you're left and I'm right, or you're, progressive and I'm conservative, or whatever. So we can't sit down and talk about things and work things out and come to a logical conclusion, a common sense conclusion to any of these problems. We can't solve any of our problems because we're afraid of each other. And that's another thing, another fear that they've instilled here in the United States anyways, is this fear of losing our democracy, right? We're gonna lose our democracy. Well, a lot of people don't understand that America is not a democracy. A democracy is one of the worst forms of government. It allows 51% of the people to basically enslave 49% of the people. All right? It's ridiculous. You can't allow the majority of people to just run roughshod over the minority. That's why democracies suck. You don't want that. But they keep pounding it into our heads that the United States is a democracy. We're not a democracy. Our founding fathers put all kinds of stuff in the Constitution to prevent democracy. Okay? Our leaders are democratically elected, but that's as far as it goes. So yeah, we're not a democracy. Never meant to be a democracy. We were, as a point of fact, they went to lengths to avoid democracy in the United States. That's not to say we're a tyranny or something. We're a constitutional republic. We're not a dictatorship or a royalty or whatever. I forget the name for the kings and queens, but we don't have that kind of government. We have a constitutional republic, but it's definitely not a democracy. But now they've got people who don't understand that are afraid of us losing our democracy. We never had it. But we're not a democracy. We're not supposed to be a democracy. And that's an important thing to point out, that they actually have people afraid of losing something that they were never supposed to have, they never had, and and it's bad if they had it, but they're afraid of losing it, right? We're spreading democracy and we're defending democracy and all this, right? And now they've got us afraid to death of illness, disease, and all this. And I remember back in the 70s and 80s, I was never afraid of that shit. I never had to wear a mask or anything. Matter of fact, if kids got the chicken pox back then, they'd all the mothers would get all the kids together so they would share it. They'd all get chicken pox, get it over with, and get it out of the way. That's how it was done back then. Nowadays, you've got to get a prescription, go take some medicine with whatever side effects. We're scared to death of getting sick. Our immune systems are getting weaker by the generation, and we're all, not all of us, not Gen X mostly, but the population at large is afraid of getting sick. We're afraid of catching a common cold. We're afraid of getting the flu. We're afraid, right? And this fear is about control, right? If you're scared to death of catching some virus, then you'll happily lock yourself in your house. And, because the government tells you to. If you're afraid of catching this disease, then you'll take the medicine the government tells you to take, right? It's about control. And fear is a difficult thing to control inside us, in our minds and in our bodies. It's once fear takes hold, it's difficult to just get rid of it. That's one of the difficult ones, an emotion to try to control inside you. And they know this. That's why they use it, because fear spreads. Fear spreads like a disease, right? It'll spread through a population, an entire population of a country. Fear will spread. And then if fear spreads and you're told to do something to prevent whatever you're afraid of, then anybody who dissents and who refuses to comply, now you're afraid of them. You hate them, right? And not you in particular, or me, or Gen X at large, just, the general population, most people. So, yeah, it's all about psychology. And they know this. They have done studies on this stuff. They realize they know how to control a population. Not only have they done studies on it, they've been doing studies for, hundreds of years probably. At least decades. They know, they've got it down to a science how to control a population. And if you don't believe me, then just look at 2020, what happened there. They're starting to implement this stuff in large actions. And whether it's an experiment to see how well they're doing, maybe 2020 was just a checkup. Hey, let's see what's going on. We can accomplish a couple things and we'll see where we're sitting with this. And our governments use this fear, this widespread fear, for an excuse to overspend in national defense and do all this crazy shit all around the world. I just wonder, just for a theoretical kind of idea bouncing around type of thing, what would happen if the United States just kept to itself? What would happen in the world? Would the world fall apart? Would it just the fires of war just scourge and run ravage across the globe? Would the oceans boil away? What would happen if the United States ever just pulled back and left everybody else alone? I just wonder. I'm not saying, I'm not saying that we need to. I'm not saying that. I'm just wondering what would happen if right now. Okay? What would happen if? And in my entire lifetime, I'm 54 years old now, and not once have they tried that. Not for a single day. We've been to Grenada, Panama, the Middle East. I was born in the middle of the Vietnam War, Iraq, Afghanistan. Every single day of my life, we've been overseas screwing around. If not, which most of the time we've been at war, but even if not at war, we've had CIA agents and stuff over there creating political dissent and all this stuff, messing with their governments and their populations. We've been doing this stuff for decades and decades, since way before I was born. And it's still happening today. We won't leave the rest of the world alone. We're constantly stirring the pot over there. So what would happen if we just drew back, took care of America for a few years and said, hey, let's just see. Everything's okay, Americans, United States citizens, everything's okay. There's nothing to be afraid of. We got it. Nobody's coming over here and we're not messing around over there. But they don't do that. They won't do that. They will never do that. Because to have us afraid of something overseas, some kind of terrorism or something like that, some kind of foreign adversary, that's a way to control us. We're afraid. So we will beg them. If they get us scared enough, we will beg them to spend, $2 or $3 trillion a year on national defense. Beg it. Take 80% of my wages and taxes. Take 90, please. Just keep the bad guys away. So that's kind of where I'm sitting with the national defense thing. Until I see them try to draw back and, leave the rest of the world alone, then I've got questions. I'm skeptical about everything they do overseas. And we're constantly being told that there might be a food shortages and all this stuff. Hunger is a major fear. Hunger is a major implement of fear, right? They scare us with hunger. In third world countries, they actually are hungry and they're scared of starvation. I mean, hell, And over here in Western civilization, well, most of it anyway, we're scared of the lack of abundance, right? But I'm not going to be able to go to McDonald's and get a triple cheese macadoodle and whatever, supersize me with everything. I can't do that. Oh my goodness, the world is going to end. I need 80,000 calories a day just to get my shit right, just to be able to think. So yeah, and they scare us with this shit constantly. When the most of these things, most of these fears, they push down on us, right? My problem with it is that they've never offered a different solution. They've never tried a different solution. Okay, just like with the national defense, they've never pulled back and said, we're not going to screw with anybody else on the planet for 3 years, and we're going to see how it goes. If everybody acts right, then we'll continue it. Just don't mess with us. We won't mess with you. The first one of y'all to come over here and start screwing around, then we're coming back in force. Something like that. They won't do that. And the same thing with the food. They've never tried anything different. It's just it's a money making machine that feeds on itself after a while. That's why we have all these monoglyphosate in our food and all this stuff and all this crap. And we're told constantly that we need to do these huge monocultures that are bad for the environment and bad for us. That's one place where it coincides. Our food industry is bad for the environment and bad for humanity. So, but they won't try anything else. Now, small organic farmers and stuff, they're trying, but the huge institutions and governments won't allow it to spread, right? They don't push that. They want us to fear. They want us to be afraid. And if we're afraid of starvation or lack of abundance, then we're okay. We'll turn a blind eye with them spraying all the corn with all these chemicals and shit, and we'll turn a blind eye to all this weird shit listed on the can, and we'll turn a blind eye to all that shit because I'm afraid I might be hungry without all those chemicals, right? I don't want to be hungry. So I might actually have to, do something. I don't want to do that. And we're afraid of injury. Injury to our bodies, injury to our vehicles, injury to our homes, injury to any of our property. And that fear fuels this enormous corrupt insurance industry, right? That is all based on fear. So I got to get health insurance. I got to get car insurance. I got to get house insurance. Even though I've never been in a car accident, I've never had my home burned down. And I'm 54 years old. Never, not once. Never made a claim on an automobile. Never made a claim on a home. Now I have used health insurance probably, I don't know, maybe half a dozen times in my life. But the amount I've paid into the health insurance over the years, I could have paid for those doctor's visits, probably 10 or 20 times over. So that kind of stuff. And that entire industry is built on fear that something might happen, right? And that kind of stuff it's just so obvious once you think about it, once you look at it, and once you realize how much fear is driving our entire community, our entire nation, the entirety of Western civilization is driven by fear. Fear of missing out, FOMO. Oh, everybody's getting a whatchamadoodle. I got to have a whatchamadoodle. I have to. I'm going to miss out. Look, they're going to have so much fun without me. So I got to get a whatchamadoodle, but I can't afford it. So I'm going to go into debt. I'm going to pay, 20% interest on my whatchamadoodle, and I'm going to spend 3-4 years, 15 years, whatever, paying it off, right? I'm going to give all this money to the bank just for, lending me the money for the whatchamadoodle. And the money doesn't really exist. It's just, digits on a screen. It's not like anybody did anything to earn it. It just manifested out of the ether. But I get my whatchamadoodle, And there's an entire, the banking industry is created on that. The fear of missing out. I want that because everybody else has it. Do we ever stop to think that, do we need that? Is it going to actually bring me happiness? Is it going to help me in any way? Now, some of the stuff we buy actually helps us and makes us more money. And that's where along the lines that I think when I think about a big purchase, a big ticket item, right? Something that I might feel the effects of after I buy it. Okay. Now, is it going to make me money? Is it going to make that money back that I spent on it? Is it going to return that money back to me? Now, if it does, if it will, then I don't have much issue making the purchase, dropping the money on it. But if it doesn't, if there's no way that item can return that money to me, then now I've got to really think about it. Do I really need this thing? How bad do I want this thing? In a year, is it going to be, sitting in a desk drawer somewhere, just gathering dust, and I'm going to forget I even had it? Or is it am I going to want to upgrade it in a year and get the newest version of it? Or is this thing going to last me, 5 years? I'm going to break it down by the year. If it's going to last 5 years, well, and I pay $100 for it, then it's going to be, it's going to cost me $20 a year. But if it's going to last me 6 months and I'm never going to use it again, and I pay $100 for it, that's $200 a year. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I think about things when I go to make purchases. The value of the thing, not just the value on the sticker, but the value that it's going to give to me, the value that I'm going to get from it. You know, how long am I going to have it? Will it give me any kind of return on my investment, or is it just something that takes my attention, that grabs my attention for a while? And a lot of people are afraid of being ashamed, you know, fear of shame, fear of ridicule, fear of whatever. And I think Gen X is singularly immune to this one, but I don't give a shit if somebody looks at me cross-eyed because I'm not wearing a mask. I don't care. Give two shits. I just don't care. But anyway, a lot of people are, you know, they'll wear a mask just because they don't want to be different, and they don't want to, you know, be shamed, because now if they pass a group of strangers all wearing masks, then, you know, that group of strangers is going to talk about them, you know, after they pass. They might say some shit. They might whisper to each other about me not wearing a mask. You know, and that actually bothers people. Some strangers saying some shit might say some shit that they can't even hear. That bothers people. I don't get that. I don't understand it. But a lot of people are like that. You know, they don't want to feel ashamed. So, and they fear that. That's an actual solid fear of being shamed or ridiculed, even by strangers. And even though they'll never know that they were ridiculed, you know, they don't want that. And a lot of us, especially here on YouTube, are guilty of self-censorship, right? We self-censor. Now, I don't know if for some of you who have been following me for a while now, back last year, I had some stuff demonetized, and I had some one video YouTube just wouldn't even show the damn thing at all, and that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of forced to self-censor if I want my YouTube videos to be shown. You know, it's black and white. Self-censor or don't do it, you know. That's it. But here lately, I've been talking about stuff, and it's been YouTube has allowed it, and I kind of got the suspicion, just kind of an undercurrent of what I had been hearing online about businesses and stuff, that because Trump had been elected, that they were gonna, you know, quit, kind of back off on all the woke and the censorship and stuff. So I took a chance, and I started talking about climate change and different things and COVID-19. Now, before Trump was elected, I wouldn't even say COVID-19 on my video. I wouldn't even say the words climate change on a video. I'd say weather, or I'd refer to COVID-19. I refer back to what happened to us in 2020 or whatever, you know. But I just kind of had that feeling that the administration change was going to change that in YouTube's censorship plans. And so far I've been right. I've said that stuff in quite a few videos now since Trump's been elected. I've said those keywords, and I haven't been censored. Now, I don't know if I'm being kind of shadow censored in the algorithm or whatever. I don't know. I don't think so, but it's possible. But yeah, so we self-censor out of fear of not being shown, not being silenced, being, you know, whatever, being ridiculed, being shamed, a lot of places. And that doesn't just have to happen on a YouTube channel, you know. That can happen in just daily life. You know, you keep your mouth shut around other people who believe stuff that you don't believe, just because you know, maybe you don't want to get in an argument, but you're afraid, not afraid like you're afraid of disease or war, but still at some level you're afraid of, you know, just upsetting everything, right? You don't want to start a big argument in the middle of a restaurant or something, so you bite your tongue. That's that kind of thing. And to wrap this up, I think we can all agree that fear is being used as a control mechanism, right? They use fear to control us. They use fear to manipulate us, They use fear as a psychological tool to get us to purchase things, to get us to vote or not vote, or, whatever. But to allow them, a lot of times, to allow them to pull some bullshit because we're afraid of the consequences, right? These made up consequences. We allow them to pull all this shit and raise our taxes and all this stuff because the weather. Okay, we allow them to go over and terrorize across the Middle East for 20 years because we are afraid of terrorism. We allow them to lock up millions of people every year because we're afraid of drugs. We allow them to do all this stuff. And instead of just fixing the problem, okay, they never do that. They never just fix the problem. They never just, stop drugs from coming across the border. They never just, secure our border and make sure no terrorists come over here. Not in a Nazi way that, like the TSA shit. Just make sure anybody coming over here we know where they're coming from and what's going on. Now, they don't have the technology to do that now. Come on. But all this stuff, right? All this stuff is means of control. We're supposed to take all this medicine now from the pharmaceutical industries to protect us from disease or whatnot, and all this other stuff. And anybody who doesn't realize that fear is being used to control us, I think you're kind of just you're sitting there with your head in the sand, These corporations and these governments and these institutions, they thrive on fear. Okay, you're afraid you're not going to look as good as the next person, so you'll spend money you shouldn't really spend, that you can't really afford to waste. You'll spend that on some extra fancy makeup or some extra fancy clothes or whatever. Because, you don't want to look poor. I mean, who gives a shit if we look poor? I mean, come on. We're all at different levels of economic success or lack thereof. So let's finally just say it's okay. It's okay to have $100 in your pocket, and it's okay to have 2 cents in your pocket. It doesn't change who you are or what, Let's let go of this fear. Let's just be what we are in that moment and let the world deal with it. And quit giving all these big institutions and governments power over us through fear. Gen X really doesn't fall into this category of constant, teeth chattering fear like a lot of people do. But I just hope that they wake up and quit, buying into the fear mongering. That's one of my real sore points with a lot of people is that they just buy into the fear mongering. It's obviously fear mongering. It's obviously bullshit, but they'll buy into it, right? Oh, and make some really bad decisions because they're afraid. It's time to settle down and think about shit. Do a little bit of research before you make that decision. How much is it actually going to cost you in time, in money, in every aspect? How much is it going to cost you? Is that thing actually going to alleviate your fear? Or are you just still going to be afraid and still this continuous hamster wheel of fear and trying to get away from it? Running from the fear on a never-ending wheel. And I'll leave you there with that. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and comment. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming a member, I'll leave that link down in the description, or you can head over to the channel page and become a member that way. If you'd like to support the channel directly, you can do so by clicking on that super thanks button down there. Or you can head over to Buy Me a Cup of Coffee and buy me a cup of coffee. I appreciate those of you who do that, and I'll leave that link down in the description too. If you're interested in Gen X gear, we got some pretty cool stuff over there at Redbubble. Gen X Thinks and Gen X branded stuff, t-shirts, coffee mugs, stickers, all kinds of cool stuff. But I'll put that link down in the description as well for any of those of you who are interested. If you can't or don't want to support the channel in any of those ways, you can always share these videos on your social media. That helps out one hell of a lot. So thank you very much to those of you who do that. I sincerely appreciate it. And if you have any ideas for future episodes of Gen X Thinks, please put those down in the comments. Or you can email us, and the email is genxthinks@gmail.com. And I'd like to say thank you to everybody who watches me on television and can't put their thoughts in the comments and stuff and can't really engage in the comments. But I know you're out there, and I really do appreciate your support. So thank you. It means a lot. It really means a lot. So thank you very much. And as always, stay frosty, Gen X, and I'll see you on the next one.